Now let's take a look at some of the options in the options menu of NEXTPLEASE. We have a default setting of no sorting, which means that all the commands that we were executing so far for navigation were executed in the order of creation of the objects. In this case, we can also take a look at the list. We have the spheres from 1 to 42 created first, then the boxes, then the cameras. We can switch to sort alphabetically, and in this case the list will be sorted with boxes in the beginning, then the cameras, and then the spheres, and the navigation will also happen in that order. Another option allows us to sort by the mouse pointer distance, which means that, for example, if I want to start from this sphere and keep the mouse pointer there over the sphere, the navigation will go radially away from the selection, and the left arrow key will go closer and closer to the location of the mouse point. I can move the mouse point, and now the selection will happen around the current point. Another similar mode is the screen center distance. In this case, the selection will happen relative to the center of the screen, so I can just pan the screen and use the center as the origin for navigation. Or use the viewpoint distance, which is the distance from my viewpoint in the viewport to the scene objects, which means that we're selecting away from the point of view or back closer to it. The sort by world origin distance sorts by the 0 point of the world grid, so the selection will go radially away from the origin or come back. And the last mode is the sort by world bounding box size. For example, the spheres that you see here, which I'm going to select now by class, start with a small radius of 3 and end with a radius of 23. And if I select any of those and use the world bounding box size, the navigation can go based on the size. In addition to being able to sort the objects that are being selected, we can also include the hidden and frozen objects. For example, if I select some of these objects and hide them, and select the sphere and start moving through the spheres, I am navigating only through the visible objects. But if I enable include hidden objects, then also invisible objects will be selected and I can change their properties without actually seeing them. Even better, I can freeze some of these objects, and normally frozen objects cannot be selected, but if we enable the include frozen objects option, going to the spheres will allow us to actually modify the spheres that are frozen and cannot be directly selected with the mouse. Another relatively cool feature is the zoom extend selected. In this case, when we're navigating through the scene and the viewport is set to perspective, navigating through the objects will also zoom at the selected object. And if you would switch the category to cameras and allow the viewport switching, using the arrow keys, we can actually cycle between the cameras, because the camera is not only being selected, it also is set as the current camera in the current viewport. We can of course do this with multiple views. If I use the arrow keys here to switch the cameras, I can select one camera here, another camera here, and the third camera here, and just using the arrow keys I can quickly select between them without having to pick from a list. The last option in the options menu allows us to create undo records. Right now, the NEXTPLEASE doesn't create any undo records, which means that we can undo whatever operations we're performing on the objects. For example, let's switch to this camera, select this sphere, and change some of its parameters. In this case, the parameter changes have been recorded. Then I can use the arrow key to, for example, let's switch to object class mode again. I can go to another sphere and modify its properties. And then I can go to another sphere and modify its properties, and all these modifications are being recorded, but the selection itself is not being recorded. If I go to the options and enable the undo records, now we're going to get NEXTPLEASE, next object, undo record. Then we can modify the sphere, and then go to the next object and modify this sphere. And then if we look in the undo list, we have the parameter change and the navigation both recorded, so we can undo the change, then we can undo the selection, undo the change, undo the selection. If we go back, the records of the parameter changes before we enabled the undo records creation will just undo the sphere changes, but not touch the object selection itself.